and it is going to speak like a dragon. In other words, it's going to professedly say that it believes in religious liberty and civil liberty, in the separation of church and state, but in the actual practice, it will deny what it claims to believe and to practice. So we are now in the time immediately before the deadly wound is healed and the papacy is released from its captivity. And then we notice the three events that we studied in our first part last night. And that is, after all cases are decided in the judgment, then the close of human probation will take place. There will be no more opportunity to change sides. And then after this, there will be a time of trouble such as never has been seen in the history of the world. God will have withdrawn his spirit from the earth, and the heart of man can be very cruel when it is devoid of the Spirit of God. And then finally, the time of trouble will come to an end. The time of trouble for God's people will come to an end when Jesus comes on the clouds of heaven with all of his holy angels to deliver his remnant from the death decree that has been proclaimed against them. That is the prophetic chain that we find in Scripture. This is not an invention of mine. We have carefully studied all of these events. Now, let's review a few details about the beast with lamb-like horns that speaks like a dragon. We have clearly identified this power as the United States of America. We noted that the two horns represent civil and religious liberty, which is based on the idea of church and state being separate from one another. The church would be religious liberty and the state would be civil liberty. Now, these principles of the separation of church and state are clearly enunciated in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. These principles of civil and religious liberty, separation of church and state, are found in the First Amendment. In other words, the two horns like a lamb are in one of the founding documents of the United States. Now, you remember that we studied that this beast from the earth is going to do everything in its power to restore the throne to the beast that received the deadly wound, to the beast that was sent into captivity. Let me just review the main points. We notice that this beast from the earth will speak like a dragon, and we've noticed that the dragon represents Satan working through what power? Satan working through Rome. We also notice that this beast from the earth will exercise all of the power of the first beast. We noticed that it will do everything in the presence of the first beast. Basically, in the presence of means on behalf of the first beast. It will command everyone to worship the first beast. It will make an image of the first beast. And it will enforce the mark of the first beast. So you notice that this second beast, this beast from the earth, representing the United States, is actually going to be instrumental in returning freedom to the papacy from its captivity and restoring the sword of civil power to the papacy. And we are seeing signs that that is happening in our very day. We are reminded of the first two clauses of the First Amendment to the Constitution. The first two clauses of the First Amendment have to do with religious liberty. The last clause of the First Amendment has to do with civil liberty. Let's notice, first of all, the first two clauses of the First Amendment to the Constitution. This is how it reads. Congress shall make no law. Congress draws up the laws, doesn't it? Congress shall make no law respecting what? An establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, the First Amendment to the Constitution prohibits Congress from writing a law that establishes any religious observance. And it forbids Congress from drawing up any law that forbids people from practicing freely their religion. One is called the Establishment Clause, the other is called the Free Exercise Clause. So basically what this means is that Congress could never write a law that enforces Sunday observance or forbids the observance of the Sabbath, because it would be establishing Sunday and it would be forbidding the free exercise of keeping the Sabbath. And yet, the prophecy tells us that the United States, even though it's going to conserve the two first clauses of the First Amendment, is going to contradict them in actual practice. Now, not only do we have in the First Amendment a guarantee of religious liberty by forbidding Congress to establish religion or to forbid the free exercise of religion, but the First Amendment also guarantees what the other horn represents. It guarantees full civil liberty. Notice clause number 3 of the First Amendment. It continues saying, I'm going to read the First Amendment in its entirety now, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Or, now comes the civil rights, or abridging the freedom of speech. Is that a civil right? It most certainly is. Or of the press. Is a free press a civil right? It certainly is. Or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Is that a civil right? Yes. And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Basically, that means that if somebody does you an injustice, you have a right to appeal to the government for the government to do you justice and to set things right. Is that a civil right? It most certainly is a civil right. So the First Amendment to the Constitution guarantees religious liberty, and it guarantees what? Civil liberty. So let me ask you, is there a separation between church and state in the First Amendment? Yes, because Congress is forbidden from making religious laws, whether establishing religion or practicing the free exercise of religion. Are you with me or not?